Hello, welcome to our first kind of lesson, voice over PowerPoint, for curriculum. We are going to real briefly today talk about the basics of curriculum. Now, when I say basic, I do not mean simple and easy. I mean the heart and the kind of starting points for curriculum. I realize we have a wide variety of professionals in our course. And some of you have been educators for years and you have a lot of experience with curriculum. There are others who don't have a lot of experience with curriculum except for the time that you have spent as a learner. And so my hope is that not only will I hopefully re-examine and refresh the idea of curriculum for those of you who have lots of experience in it, but we will also introduce these basic concepts of curriculum for those of you who are not familiar or as familiar with it. And no matter who you are or where you're at in your profession or what it is you want to do in your future, that you will see how this curriculum applies to your past, your present, and your future instruction, facilitation, development, whatever it is that you are looking at. Now, when we talk about the basics of curriculum, we are going to be going way back. I have this little book written by Ralph Tyler in 1949, and he addresses 4 basic questions about curriculum. And I love this little book because it transcends over time. And even though he wrote it in 1949, these 4 questions are still things that you should think about in your future as you create and write and evaluate curriculum. You will be doing a project for me where you will be creating a new curriculum or revising a curriculum that currently exists. And so I encourage you to use these 4 questions and make sure you have them covered as you discuss the curriculum for me in this project. So, first of all, I think it is very important to note that there are books written about curriculum. We could spend multiple courses discussing this information. And it is also important to recognize that there is not one specific way to develop, facilitate, create, instruct in this world of curriculum. There are so many facets of curriculum. And so I would say my goal is to present you with information that will simply increase your knowledge about curriculum and how it will play a part in your instruction, your development, and your facilitation. So to begin, our curriculum can be classified in many ways, as I've already stated. First of all, it can be a plan for action or a written document. Secondly, it can be a system for dealing with people and the process or the organization of personnel and procedures. Third, it can be a field of study comprising of its own foundations and domains of knowledge as well as its own research, theories, principles, and specialists. Next, it can also be considered in terms of subject matter or content. And finally, it deals with the experiences of the learner. So I kind of like these words that I highlighted in the blue because I think it really makes us think that, curriculum, it can be subject matter, it can be a plan, it can be an experience, and it can be an outcome. Okay, so again, lots of different things. So I would like you to take a minute, and if you could just pause the video and answer or kind of write down something to these 2 questions. How are these classifications applicable to you in your current career? Okay, that's our first one. Now, also, not only your current career, but think back to when you were a student. Think back to now that you're in the EDD program. How do these classifications of curriculum impact you? And how do you see them as evidence of your learning and your experiences? And then also, if you can, think about kind of the future. Depending on what you want to do once you achieve your degree, how are they relevant? What will you be doing with these classifications of curriculum in a future job? And then kind of once you think about kind of the past, the present, and the future, I would also like you to think about how the classifications are related to the educational philosophies that were presented earlier in our course. As we stated back then, it is very, very important for us to know why we make the decisions we do when we create and implement curriculum and education and our development, our facilitation, our mentoring, whatever it would be in our field. And so it's important to think about what's my educational philosophy and how does it support my plan for action or my written document? How does it support the system that I have created for dealing with people and processes in my organization? How is it related, not so much supports, but because of our field of study is more of the theory and the knowledge and the principles, how is educational philosophy connected to that? And then finally, when we think about our subject matter and content, we think about our experiences again, can you validate why you choose to address what you choose in a classroom, in professional development, in staff development, in mentorship, in facilitation? Can you connect these two? Okay, so again, please go ahead and pause the video for just a second, and if you can answer those two questions for me, I would appreciate it. Okay, thank you. So I hope you had kind of some thoughtful insights in how these pieces of curriculum are connected to who you are, who you've been, and who you will become. Now, when we talk about curriculum, there are some common terminology that you will see in some of the readings and the exploration that you do of these types of curriculum. And so first of all, there's the recommended curriculum. And that is what our scholars and our professional organizations say is most important. This is what you should cover in your curriculum. Okay, then we have the written piece, and this is what actually appears in the national, state, and legal documents. So our recommended curriculum is not always going to make it to the written curriculum. And even more ironically, what the taught curriculum is what our instructors attempt to implement or deliver could or could not be part of the written and recommended curriculum. And then next is our supported curriculum, which is our textbooks, computers, etc. Anything that supports what it is that you are teaching, facilitating, developing. And then on this next slide, we have the assessed curriculum. So it's that which is tested and evaluated. And then we have the learned, and here's where we get to the good stuff of have we really done our jobs? What are our learners actually gaining through our instruction, through this implementation of the curriculum? And then one of my favorite types of curriculum is the hidden curriculum. And this is that unintended curriculum, the messages that we send based on our behavior, based on our treatment of students, those that we are facilitating, those that are attending any kind of professional development or development seminars or things like that we would hold for people. And sometimes we don't mean to teach things, and we do. And I'm sure you can go back and think about some of the teachers and instructors that you have had in your life and think about some of those hidden messages that they sent you. Organization, disorganization, kindness, not kindness, you know, all of these hidden messages that we have. So again, if you would just take a minute for me and pause the video and just think about what these types of curriculum look like in your past, present, and possibly future educational setting. Thanks. Okay, so now that we have just talked about some of the kind of curriculum and some of the terminology and things, I do want to touch on, again, this book called Basic Principles of Curriculum and Instruction by Ralph Tyler, excuse me, and I want to touch on his 4 fundamental questions, which should be answered in developing any curriculum plan of instruction. So here are the 4 questions that we will cover, and I'll give you just a second to look over those. Okay, so number 1, what educational purposes should the educational institution seek to attain? Now again, this may not be an educational institution. It may be a business. It may be if you are working in staff or professional development, it could be a district office. There's lots of different places where we seek to create this curriculum and these ideas that we need to teach and facilitate and develop. So, what educational purposes should you seek to attain? Now, when we think about that, what our kind of ultimate goals are, we can use various sources. And even back in 1949, Tyler was thinking, we want to use our learner. And we definitely want to use the contemporary life outside of, well, Tyler would say school, but outside of the place that we are in. And then again, we need those, as we mentioned earlier, kind of that recommended curriculum from subject specialists, theory, research. It is essential to select the number of objectives that can actually be attained. So when you're thinking about the educational purposes you want to attain, what are they, and how much time do you have, and what resources do you have, and what can you do to make sure that your objectives or your goals are possible to attain in the amount of time and resources and money and such that you have. And then it's always very important to remember that your final analysis of your objectives and your goals are going to be matters of choice, and they will be considered value judgments for those that are responsible for the school or institution in which you are in. So we need to be cognizant of that. And you know, if you've got 1 or 2 people, someday you're going to write curriculum maybe for a new program. You want to make sure you have input, because it doesn't all come down to you and 2 or 3 other people. You definitely want to be inclusive in a situation like this, where we are considering the learner, we are considering life inside and outside of your educational institution, as well as the theory and the research, okay? So secondly, what educational experiences can be provided that are likely to attain these purposes? So you've created your purposes and you believe in them. They're supported, they're evaluated, reassessed, all sorts of good stuff as we're building something like that. And so then we have to figure out, how are we going to attain them? And so in this, Tyler says that we just need to decide on the particular educational experiences that will be provided. And it's very important to remember that learning takes place through the active behavior of the student. It is what he or she does that he or she learns, and it's not what the instructor does. So very much now, for those of you who are in the education realm, you know all about differentiated instruction and blended learning and active learning and flipped classrooms and so many, you know, hands-on learning, so many great experiences that we can give the learner so that he or she can absorb the information and make the information theirs. So for those of you who are kind of new to this, and maybe you will be developing curriculum very soon or sooner than later, it's important for you to, you know, think about these active teaching strategies, and something that is really, really easy to Google and talk to people about, and figure out what experiences will be best for the students to attain these purposes. So third, how can these educational experiences be effectively organized? In order for educational experiences to produce a cumulative effect, they must be so organized as to reinforce each other. Okay, and the organization greatly influences the efficiency of instruction and the degree to which major educational changes are brought about in the learner. So we need to know, how are we going to build? How are we going to build on that basic knowledge of Bloom's taxonomy down at that knowledge and comprehension and understanding? And how are we going to build to the analysis and the synthesis and the application? Now, there are two kind of things that I would like you to think about when it comes to organizing your learning experiences. And there's, of course, much more to think about than these two, but these two I think really do encompass what we need to think about as far as it comes to building our curriculum. And the first one is vertical organization. Now, I use some pretty simple examples because all of us have been in 6th and 7th grade. But vertical would be the relationship between 6th grade geography and 7th grade geography. Okay, so if you're building curriculum, it's kind of that working up, like what are we going to teach our 6th graders so that it prepares them when they're 7th graders. Okay, so we build. And then there's also horizontal organization, and this would be, how does 6th grade geography relate to 6th grade history? How are we finding things within these two courses that can build upon each other? And more importantly too, what are we doing to make sure we're not covering the same thing in geography that we may be covering in history? And the same goes for the vertical organization. We have to make sure we're not being so repetitive in 7th grade that the 6th graders are seeing so much of it again. So when you think about your final project for me, think about the vertical organization, because some of you may be creating a whole curriculum, a plan of study, and making sure that your courses build upon one another, and courses that are taken during the same semester, they maybe have some connection, and there's some theory and some philosophy within the program that makes them make sense. And the same for those of you who may just be creating a single course for me because that's what you choose to do for your project. Make sure that that knowledge from day one of your course is building, so that you have that foundation and those building blocks for students to be successful on a final project or when they're ready to leave your class and go to another one. So think about those vertical and horizontal organizations. And then finally, how do we determine whether these purposes are being attained? And this, of course, the concept of evaluation, where we must appraise the behavior of the learners, since it is the change in these behaviors which is sought in education. And so, of course, there are many ways. Okay, and you know what? I lost my thought here because I have another slide. Okay, so first of all, we have to appraise the behavior. Second of all, it has to be more than a single appraisal. Okay, it is great if you can pre-assess, do something at the beginning and then do something at the end, so you can see how your students have, or your learners have grown. And I think this can even be seen in a mentoring situation or development in a place of business, where we need to see where people are before they start. We need to know who they are, what they can do, and that way we can determine that at the end, has this learner made these gains that we needed them to? So with our determining whether they have been attained, our evaluation must appraise the behavior, and then we need to have more than a single appraisal. Okay, so now here's the slide I was ready for. How can we determine whether these purposes are being attained? Our evaluations can occur in a variety of ways, and I know my educators could add a ton more to this list, but just thinking about our written and electronic assessments, thinking about observations, interviews, questionnaires, surveys, artifacts of collecting the actual products made by the learners, and then sampling, more of a portfolio or something that we could collect of the individual or individuals that are in this learning journey. So again, lots more could be added to this list, but I think these are kind of some of the basic ways that we can determine and we can evaluate whether our purposes are being attained. So through this presentation and your class resources, I hope that we have kind of started to address the basic concepts of curriculum. There are many more resources in our course shell, and I encourage you to set aside time to read what I have provided, because I have sifted through a lot of material, and these articles are what have resonated with me the most. And of course, if you have anything else that you would like to share with us, please let me know and I can kind of push that out to everybody, or the same, you guys can email us as a group as well. And then through this presentation, we have addressed Ralph Tyler and the 4 questions by which curriculum should be based on. Now, we will again get more views and more perspectives of curriculum as we move through the course, but this I hope will give you just kind of some basic foundation to start upon, and for my education